Howdy, my name is Edgar Garza, and this is my presentation on biofuels. Let's get right into it. So as for our introduction, this is my presentation on algae-based biofuels, which are a biofuel dependent on algae for production. We'll get more into the nitty-gritty later, but basically during photosynthesis, algae produces these lipids, which are the basis for these biofuels. Some bullet points here I wrote down that are pretty important for algae and for consideration of as a source of biofuel. It absorbs CO2 during growth, which offsets CO2 emissions later, which means algae is carbon neutral. Additionally, algae is able to grow in multiple different environments and is highly productive, which is why it's been getting a lot of recent interest. So let's get right into the growth and cultivation of algae. So basically, it is grown mostly in open cultivation systems, such as over bodies of water like ponds. There's closed cultivation systems as well, but those aren't as commonly used. There's multiple issues with these, mainly money and cost and whatnot. But some solutions include closed photobioreactors, which are these devices that work to capture as much sunlight as possible, which means more productive algae, which means more lipids, which is overall a net positive, right? While we're on the topic of production and sunlight, this algae collects CO2 in sunlight, which they use as fuel to produce lipids during photosynthesis. These lipids are the basis of all algae-based biofuels. And additionally, some algae produce ethanol through fermentation and respiration. And these aren't as commonly used, but I thought this is pretty interesting how algae has these different applications and uses available. Moving on, we have development status. Algae is still currently under pretty heavy development. It's not as widely spread or whatnot, and it's still pretty expensive. But recently, it's getting a lot of interest. And right now, research is mostly primarily focused on just optimization and whatnot. For the carbon footprint, as mentioned earlier, algae is nearly carbon neutral. In fact, some estimations say it could even be carbon negative if we get to that point. And how this works is basically algae uses CO2 for photosynthesis, meaning that any CO2 from burning biofuels or production or whatnot, whatever may come up, is offset by the production of algae using photosynthesis. Additionally, these CO2 sources can come from sources such as power plants or other hotspots of CO2, which means we can repurpose those emissions as well, which means overall algae is very carbon neutral, very positive in this aspect. As for the economic impact, algae is pretty expensive to maintain. It's still relatively a new and then being developed solution. Additionally, the photobioreactors that I mentioned earlier are pretty expensive to maintain and produce. But researchers are hopeful that with future advancements in research that hopefully these costs would fall down. As for public communications, I mean, currently the public isn't really aware of algae biofuels. I mean, before this presentation, I myself wasn't even aware that these were being developed, but researchers are hopeful that with growing development and production, awareness will rise, and hopefully support for algae will rise in form of economics or just general support of this solution. As for an analysis of algae fuels, while having a really promising future, is still pretty under development as well. And once you catch up, hopefully algae can be a viable option. As for the plan of action, currently the game plan is pretty simple: build more algae farms near sources of CO2 and where they can capture sunlight. Develop these photoreactors to optimize production of lipids. Additionally, launch information campaigns to raise awareness and funding. And then you can invest in making more strands of algae to make, to maximize production and optimization. These are my sources, and that will be my presentation. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much for listening.